put things on a globe, you have different ways to do it. The first time you do it just one way, and you have to do from another. And as long as you can convert from one reference system to another, you'll be fine. At worst, you don't have the one from the target system to the origin you have, but then there are always ways to convert to project and whatnot. So I would say just do it one way. Still keep the depth in mind, because I think if you somehow collapse to 2D, at least if you think about VR and AR, then I think, yeah, it's not that interesting. So you need to keep somehow depth in mind if you want to design something. But exactly which implementation you pick, as long as you can juggle between multiple, I think it's fine.
No, that's really interesting. Yes. It also means, for instance, so if you have a particular way in which, say, you're using a Z order in your albeit two-dimensional thing, probably having an annotation of that somewhere, ideally accessible in some way in the metadata of the document, so that someone coming to it, wanted to do something else. Oh, right. So I need to flip, the polarity on this axis or something if I want to do something. That's really interesting, and I totally get your point about not being sort of too hard-edged and saying, oh, it must be this way. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing, because to me these are the little corners that need to feed into our next generation of tools. There needs to be somewhere you can capture this, because if it has to be stored elsewhere, it can and will be lost. In the same way that whilst an image map is probably one of the translation devices, it isn't going to be the image map that we know and love from the 1990s. It's sort of functionally similar, but I can see it actually has all sorts of nuances. And a real challenge is well, where, does the link between, something that says defines, this part of this document at whatever scale, is something I want to interact with. What it interacts with, well, the question is, that stored in the document? Is it dereferenced elsewhere? And I think that's probably up for grabs. I mean, anyone can make the point of it's a done deal. I'm not sure it is. I would have my best guess is that sort of web tech and URLs and something will be part of the piece, but I wouldn't like to bet the farm saying I know how it's going to roll out. Frode, now you're here, shall I cede the floor back to you, and perhaps we might look at some of the things, Fabian, unless you've got some things. You're going to talk about the thing. Okay, I'll hand it to you.
I don't need to talk about this. I'm very happy to go over to Fabian. It's just that for some reason what you didn't update on my master calendar.
Oh, okay.
So I just think literally 30 seconds, 60 seconds to go through this. So starts with a brief introduction, headsets. Then we have 3 sessions with Bob Stein, coffee break. We have 3 more sessions, go away for lunch for an hour. Then we have these sessions, coffee break. Then we have Peter, our Peter, Eduardo, and then you, Bob. You are right before Jaron Lanier. You're the last one because you're the furthest away and you deserve the longest sleep. And then we get the thing where Alan is supposed to help us get a discussion on making a document, writing down the issues we need that are in front of us to get to a point we want to get to. Then for those of us who are physically here, we can go downstairs in the Linnaean library crypt and see the original documents of how he designed the world. And then we go for dinner across, some people go for dinner across the road. That is all fine, right? No issues? Yep. All right, good. Next day starts with Mez. She's in Australia, but she's going to be just online anyway. Ronak physically there, then Caitlin, coffee break. Klaus, I'm not sure what he's going to talk about because he's been overloaded with work, but he's coming right before Fabian does his double header of a bit of VR and a bit of hands-on. And then we go Sam, who just sent me some emails here about some kind of scheduling thing. I'm sure I may have to move him, but it will have no consequence for this, really. Then we have a few onlines, coffee break, a few onlines. So all of this is going to be online towards the end of the day, which is going to be weird, but fair enough. And then we have what I'm really excited about in terms of closing it. It's not going to be just a summing up, but we'll probably do just like the day before Google Doc or something of how can we dream together? Having been inspired by all these other people, what are the things we want? And then just to make you jealous, Bob, because we want you to come here in the future, then we're going to go have a wonderful Singapore dinner and see what happens in the evening. Inspiration for next time. So that's it. Yeah, Fabian, question or just take over?
No, a little remark that I don't know how practical it is, but I'm wondering if switching somebody offline in the morning to somebody offline or the other way around, online of the afternoon on Wednesday, because I think it's a little bit weird indeed if everybody is presenting online like 3 hours in a row or 2 hours in a row.
I agree with you. Maybe we should do that. The only concern is, I know that Karina, whom I'm not sure if she's going to be able to join us, but she's on the west coast of America. That's why I'm just like with Bob, putting her towards the end. These guys are kind of borderline. So it's the time difference issue. You know, if you're coming in late, you should, what's that? That's not relevant to this.
Or maybe Scott or Paul, I don't know if someone just to break a little bit the whole online, because it's a bit strange for people who are there, I guess. I don't know. Maybe with the Q&A, the discussion, it will be fine. I don't know.
Well, it won't be a mixed media event if at least one person somehow doesn't make it or has to be swapped. So I suspect the reality is that we may find it happens anyway.
Let's move on to Fabian.
I've done one such move, Fabian, and we'll see what more I can. Yeah, please take over, Fabian.
Yeah, okay. So I'll share my screen. So let me know when you can see it, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first thing, which is technical, but I think important, is I put the code of most of the thing I did recently on a repository so that people can comment or criticize or whatnot. And as I said or asked a few days ago and mentioned briefly before, issues, so that if somebody has idea, critics, suggestion, there can be a way to capture it. So I'll see how easy it is for people to use eventually. But otherwise, it's a little bit tricky to do everything live. It's the best, of course, but it's hard to be able to guess. So anyway, the code is online, and a way to add suggestion or critics is there. The part then, I'll start with this. I lied a couple of days ago. I don't know if it was on purpose or by mistake, but Frode, you asked if I was using Troika, and I thought I was. Well, I think I maybe hoped I was, but I'm not sure. But the point is I wasn't. But I switched from it, and it was, I don't know, 20 minutes time to do so. So that was pretty straightforward. So now it is Troika, not the usual. And that allowed me to implement some of Bob's suggestion in terms of readability, and also on Brendel earlier suggestion, so that now we have the outline and then the text is pretty much always readable.
Very cool.
One strange thing, let's say, is that I put some, I was not aware of it, but there is something called HTML mesh. So this is actually a web page of my wiki, and it's not an image. It's actually rendered, and the text is rendered. It's not as nice, but it's still readable. And as you can see, it is, not an image. And when I say it's not perfect, it's, for example, here there should be a video. There is some CSS that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Here there is an iframe from a Docker image. It doesn't show, but yeah, it's better than nothing, I would argue. And in my opinion, also interesting part is you can interact with it. So if you remember, I think most of you were there, but I introduced Computational Notebooks a couple of weeks ago. And a practical example was on annotation of times of our videos. So here I jump to YouTube at the right time. But if I go back, so it loads the assets here on the side, or the widget rather. I'm trying to center on it. And then I can interact with it. And if I interact with it, the text with the links also are updated. As you can see also, visually it's far from perfect, but again, it works. And why I insisted, let's say, a bit on this, to have both HTML and interaction in HTML in there is because let's say if we go on the future of text name, to me, computational notebooks are in a lot of situation, the future of text. I also, just for clarity, let's say I cropped, let's say, the length of all the lines. Here, that's a glossary. And the number also, I think here I have 20 items, but just to show that the whole column of text is not there. It's not a bug, just to avoid a bit of clutter. One little thing also is the issue I mentioned before, or here, like easily enable. So there's a lot of stuff, but text and hands are actually networked. For example, if I go back here, it's that one. So it's not text that's been typed. It's text that's pulled live from a code repository, to be able to intertwine both, so that when you work on this in VR or outside of VR, let's say you keep track of the big picture. Again, it doesn't have to be right there. It could be moved anywhere in space. The point is to find a good way to organize it, but it's live.
Can I ask a question at this point?
Yeah.
Thank you. When you're showing the glossary, for example,
Yes.
can it be scrolled?
Not right now, but since you have, let's say, 20 items, you can imagine here like a little piece of text on top that says, okay, I want the next 10, and at the bottom, the previous 10, or something like this.
But so you can't do a smooth scrolling motion in this framework?
No, let's say no.
Okay.
Adding text that says next 10, previous 10, or does it directly as code, I think would be pretty straightforward. But let's say to make it where you grab everything, it's not, let's say, the natural way, or the it's okay. Basically text as the way to interact is the first primitive.
But Fabian, a quick one, just so I understand, when you say sort of in terms of scrolling and no, and I understand that's the whole sort of out of framework in terms of this doing prototyping, but is that because this is created has no notion of scrolling? So in other words, it's a technical limitation, but only arguably transitory. It's not that this can't be done, but if you're using this particular creation method, you can't do it.
Yeah, no, it can definitely be done. The thing is, if, let's say, the scrolling by pinching a pinch of text, I'm confident in, let's say, 1 hour tops it can be done. The thing of scrolling as a motion or movement, I have no idea. But definitely more than an hour. Feasible, but much longer, I guess. Not sure.
Thanks.
So my question on this relates to, like Doug Engelbart had this thing about it's important to have smooth motion because it's like skiing downhill. If you can't change the direction of your skis, you fall over, that whole thing, right? So the biggest surprise to me going into VR, modern VR, is how incredibly stable the environment is. It's just rock solid. But what is not rock solid is our hands. Our hands are better now. It's almost magic, but at the same time, there's a little bit of kind of the hand's not going exactly where you want. So in terms of helping someone feel that this is a work future, the rock solid of the environment is done. That's hardware. But what would be really useful if we had a way where somebody could take a knowledge thing and really easily change it. So you've given us a limitation, that is fine. But I could imagine that maybe let's say the glossary appears on cards, not necessarily with a background, but logically they're cards. And you can then flick to the next one. So they do load 1 by 1 or like 3 by 3. What do you think of something like that? So you go in and it's super smooth to go forward or backward in the collection.
Again, if you put an item on top, let's say a piece of text to go next one or next 10 or whatever, and you pinch it, yeah, that's going to be rock solid, and it's going to be, I think, relatively intuitive. But if you still want the motion, I think an easy way to do this is to emulate what you have on, let's say the scroll bar on the browser. So if here, next to the glossary, for example, or a list of items in text, there was a sphere, or doesn't even matter, a piece of a
cylinder.
A cylinder, yeah, and then you pinch it and you move it vertically, and the rest would scroll. I think again, same, that would be maybe an hour kind of job. It's pretty straightforward.
I think that would be really phenomenal. And the reason is probably obvious, but the way that I see initial working in VR, you have a core working area that isn't necessarily bigger than a monitor, foveal vision and all of that stuff. But if you have a bigger knowledge collection, to be able to really easily go up and down it is almost a prerequisite.
Quite interesting. It makes me think of, I can't remember what they were called, those old-fashioned devices people had were like a book. It was like a set of reading things. You had a wheel. You would have, 8 or 9 books open on a shelf, and you could rank. Because you're in, if I understand you correctly, Fred, you're sort of implying the same thing, that you have all this stuff out there in your mind's eye. You sort of know it's there. It's not necessarily all in the immediately visible space. And what you're talking about is the ability to sort of move it into broadly the area of focus. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, this is where it really, the rubber hits the road. You have a big piece of knowledge in there. How can you change what bit of it you're seeing? So yeah, that kind of mechanism. There's some new exciting VR hardware coming out, and I think I put it on a Twitter thing. But anyway, so the guy doing this YouTube channel, he asked his readers, or all VR people, what do they most want for the next VR headset? Do they want high resolution, faster speeds, better graphics? All of them said better content, games or otherwise. Very few people pointed to the hardware. So to me, that really says there's beginning to be a bit of a maturity. So once we're in this space, and you have this incredible view that you've made here, Fabian, to be able to at least move it.
At least read it.
It is actually more readable when it is your head in space than it is in this view. This view is absolutely horrible, seeing it as a web rendering. It's a very, very different thing with the headsets. But obviously that's, Bob, what you're saying is really, really important. And that will have to be looked at also.
It's important for a presentation in a conference like this to have a story. Here's some simple sequence of things that the user or read one the other going to do, and say that to people, and then walk them through that step by step. Here's the core working area, as Fred says, and you see it, and then you say, and then there's all the other information that's connected to this, and you see it, and it takes that's kind of how just a story, a very simple sequence of events of what somebody is doing. I think that's really important, at least for the people who are coming to this conference without some of the background in creating the virtual reality elements.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we had a story, and we've looked at that, of course, on and off over the last many months. However, this will not be presented as a presentation. The way people will access these experiences, actually, Fabian, can I take over the screen for a second?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, hang on. So what we have done yesterday, we put together this page here. So on the Future of Tech Symposium page, on top here, we have some links. One of them is to VR experiences, and this is in the email to people too. So on here is a bit of intro saying what we're doing, but then what we have is 4 VR experiences. One of them is, I put it in quotes, the simple mural, because it's technically it's only a rectangle you move around, and it's your mural, of course, Bob, but it's such a powerful interaction. Then there is these other ones for different reasons, but the whole point is people try them on either at home if they have a headset at home, or they try it in on the first day that we're together. So they're literally there. And the second one is a little bit of a concept map, which is fun because it's from a piece of data that is on a normal laptop. The third one is what I've done, and it's really important to highlight that I did it as a novice. So it's an example of if you spend a couple hours learning this, you can do this yourself. And then finally, it's the one thing that Fabian is showing now that we're calling the self-editing tool, which is very, very advanced in terms of what it can do. But if you have a look at these other ones, it gives you more of a sense of opportunities. Yeah, Mark, sorry.
It's well, no, it's I come on. It's a tangent and link back to what was just saying. So I'll let you finish out this point.
Oh, that was it.
Okay, I was thinking as Bob was making the point about the narrative. There are two. There's another sort of duality to perhaps bring out for people who are less familiar with this environment or this problem space. Is that there are 2 sort of separate things to do. One is just taking something that you know, be it a 3D, literal object like this or something on a screen in front of you, and it appearing in a meaningful way in VR, as opposed to what you do with it in VR. Obviously, to be able to do the second, you need to have the former. And one of the things we're discussing is the sort of the problem this presents for some things you want to get soup to nuts from, creating the thing in 2D and moving it ahead. But I do think it's worth teasing those 2 things apart, because I think otherwise it could be confusing for people. To understand that there is a challenge in itself of just taking things you're familiar with, thought you understood, and never change, and putting them into this new environment and how we interact with them. And then how we interact with them in that environment in ways that just are new and not possible in our existing environments.
I was just saying this for the benefit of Fabian's. Has a whole bunch of functionality there, which we're not sure of when people will be watching what they have watched before. We don't know if they have looked at the 4 things which Fred just showed us. It doesn't need to be a complicated story. I know story then conveys, a character and a purpose and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. A story I'm talking about is, oh, you've just arrived here. Here's the first thing you're bringing in, and then you bring in another thing, and then you bring in another thing, and then you bring on the 4th thing, and that's all. And now you've got your working environment put together, instead of showing you the whole working environment at the end of that process. I mean, Fabian did not, I imagine at least, simply throw all those 4 things together in one click. No, he went through a story. even in in his own space, he first put one of those things, the background in, or maybe the foreground thing in, text in, and then another thing, and then one of my mural things, and so forth. But it would be helpful just in that simple, I want to stop calling it a story, a sequence of appearance will be helpful.
And
to
yeah,
some
but Bob, they're not
people.
going to, they, other than what is on that webpage, which is also in the book draft, they're not going to be presented. There's going to be at least 4 Oculus headsets in the room, and people can choose which one to go to experience them, or they can do it, experience it at home. Because doing presentations of VR, you know how it looks, people's heads jitter and it looks horrible. So it's purely, all we're trying to sell, so to speak, is the idea that these environments are really stable. It feels like a real world. And 2, you can do things on them. That's it. The expectations of what this can do is really, really low. It goes from, oh my God, the mural can be moved, that's incredible, to this Fabienne thing is way more sophisticated than I can understand now at all, but it really shows potential. So the expectation is very, very constrained. Hopefully next year we can do a presentation in VR, and then we can have a story and we can all be in there together. That would be amazing.
I do think Bob's point still stands in terms of the sort of the accumulation of those features, even if it's intended to sort of narratively introduce those, to be able to say, this is the base and this is what happens next. Having those kinds of scripts down pat is very valuable for being able to kind of introduce people, even if it's one-on-one in the context of just directing them while you have some sense of what it is they're likely to be seeing inside headset as you stand patiently next to them.
Well, okay. What can we do? Let's try to do. Let me go back to our page here.
Wait. I will just show more stuff to insist, but you will hopefully see why.
Okay.
But I hear your point, and also, yes, I'm also guilty of that at work. Like I show stuff, and then I let people hopefully not just try to figure it out, but even find a use for it. So it's a bad habit. But anyway, I'll show a couple more things, but you will see why. Let me know, please, when you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so there was, I also added a little button on the corner to go back from the page to the issue. So if people have criticism or suggestion, they can directly add them there. I stop after this, but funny thing also is the background page here, the web page can be changed. So it can be not any page, but it can be dynamically changed there, the URL. So I don't know if I can put future of text. Hopefully it will display something. Maybe not. Let's imagine it did. I'll check why. But anyway, the point is, in terms of story and in terms of how to introduce why all this, that was why, Bob, I asked you also for the mural. So I did put here in the URL bar, you can add what I call the background, and could be a mural because the mural is spatial, and specify the font color. And if you do this, then you have also pages from the book in terms of how to interact with the mural. Of course, the content here, it's still text there that is not related to the mural, But my point is going from one source of text that is the glossary, or another here, which is the timeline, to others like comments or GitHub's issue or whatnot, that is relevant to the background, which would be the mural, and have the pages of the book related to the methodology, might make for an interesting story. And it's a pretty straightforward step from here to there.
Yes, and the only sequence that I'm suggesting is it's helpful to understand what you're doing, at least for me. If you put those on into the screen in sequence, that's all. So that you say, we have a background, and pop, the background comes up, and we say, and we have you have some pages in a book that relate to this background. Here they are, and they pop in, and then you say, we have, that's a sequence. I could sometimes call it a story, but I'm calling it a sequence now because people don't like the story. Some people's meaning of story involves too much of what I'm thinking of. And it's that, just simply that sequence in a minute. A minute of presentation gives more coherence to the overall, to being able to look at the overall thing. That's all.
Yes.
Can you build that in, Fabian?
Yep. Sorry, I'll just jump on this. When I also sketch mostly for a diagram, usually it's not beautiful, but it makes sense, hopefully. But it doesn't make sense to anyone who see the last moment of the diagram. So that's also why I made a little tool where you go from one step by step, you replay how the diagram is being drawn. So I will try to find a way to do this to, let's say, pedagogically introduce the different features in a way that they all either make sense, or in a story or sequential, because now it's, even for me, it's a bit scary when it's too much. So I get that. I'll find a way to introduce them sequentially in a logical manner.
I think that's really good, Fabian, because if I reflect on the year or so of exposure I've now had to VR, if I hadn't had that, I'd be stuck at this thing of, whoa, there are too many things happening. So it often feels like one's dumbing it down massively, but I think that's just a reflection on sort of how quickly one acquires sort of quite niche knowledge. And it's not that it's not important, or it's not whether it's niche or not, it's just the fact that for a lot of people in the room, it just won't be obvious without some very gentle signposting. And that the good thing about it is, for a small amount, that I think it ups engagement, or their ability to make cogent observations on what they've seen.
Yeah, but Fabian, can you load things in sequence in this environment to do what Bob is suggesting? And if so, would we like to have a voice-over audio recording play, or would we like to have text description? How are we going to make it clear what the sequence is? Would be interesting, if it's possible.
Yes, I'll need to think about it, but basically, I think so. Because you can toggle basically visibility of elements whenever you want, to group of elements. So I might not have been very clean now, in the sense that maybe some metadata that this is part of the glossary might be missing, but I don't see anything really hard there. Introducing voice and like if it's, I don't think that's necessary, in the sense that if somebody presents it, they can talk as they do so. Same, the entire sequence could be a kind of line at the bottom with the 5 different kind of features, and then when you click on the name of the feature, it will hide it. So that seems pretty straightforward. Again, naively, because I haven't done it, but should be easy.
So what's the story here then, in the sense of sequence of loading? Because if we can do that, I do agree with Bob that within a single VR experience, it is a useful thing, absolutely. But I don't know what overhead it would be to create that.
I agree. I'm just saying, if possible, you know.
Fabian is thinking really hard.
That's why I like to be here. Yeah, I'll do my usual, which is I'll just implement it technically, and then I can see how it makes sense to, or what story makes sense, or what the sequence. But I'll start by grouping the different elements or the feature individually and toggling the visibility of each, and then I can see of how what to introduce first, maybe the background first, and then adding the naively, I just speaking as I think. I would put the background first, let's say the mural, and then once that's done, the images on the side, and then the ability to load a source of text, let's say issue from GitHub or something like this, and then typing with a keyboard or with a hand a new piece of text, and then move both the newly added piece of text or the one that's been loaded from a remote source on the mural, like very close to the mural, and then step back. And then maybe at the very end, if that makes sense also for the audience, the part where the text itself is code that can be executed, because I think it's pretty unique and I believe powerful.
Yes.
One thing that
I have to leave now, but that sounds good. Thank you. Bye.
See you later. One thing that you may also consider, Fabian, is to split the environment into two different things. So one is full, but one is less. I mean, I do think it is a bit of an overreach for the expectation of the audience to understand the coding parts. So, you know, so far I've just looked at it and said, okay, this is super impressive and that's all we really need right now. But having Bob be a bit pushy there in the right kind of way, I would really like to see one implementation of this that has no background, nothing other than executable code. Because it's such a powerful thing. And, you know, and of course, this thing that it can execute on, one sample thing, so to speak.
I'll have to think a bit through it. I think executing code on something, for example, once you have the different piece of information, I don't know, next to the mural, but not really on it, and then you pinch to make them snap and you see how that's done, maybe that would be enough. But it could be or rather imagining that there is the ability to toggle the visibility of all the different individual features, hiding back everything to quote unquote just code should not be a problem.
Okay, so you're making a lot of assumptions on the side of the user, that the user is clever, has interest, and has time. And I think for one solution, yes. But I think it would also be very valuable if you remove the 3D background thing, if you remove PDFs on the side, and just have your executable stuff. For one thing, because imagine, I expect that once we are in, you know, all of this is normal in production, one of the modes will be, if you're coding, all you have is your code. Of course, many different windows and all of that kind of stuff. But it'll be very, very distraction-free, very minimalist. As one of the views, right? So we, you know, maybe we call it Fabian's self-editing maximum environment. The other one is minimalist environment.
I also don't know how to convey this, but programming on a plane or somewhere else that's very, how do you say, not aggressive, but
space
It's not
constraints.
where I want to focus and then be able to do that thing that is a pretty demanding task and being able in the zone, let's say, that was amazing. It's an amazing experience. But I don't know how to convey that to people. But it does work. It's amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's, yeah. I mean, it's really difficult for me to give feedback because I have a very specific aesthetic style. I have, you know, my sensibilities and stuff. I know you're very, very good at accepting feedback for these things, but all I can say is I agree with Bob's notion of some way for people to get into this. And I don't think we can do a story. I know he meant story in many different ways, but I think that during the event next week, people are going to put it on their head and be like, wow, this is really cool. Next, almost, right? So if we just tell them, okay, you put this on, there's a thing in front of you. Here's a keyboard that's connected, you know, and then we actually tell them what to write. You know, make ball green, just whatever. And they type that, they hit enter, and it happens. It's really powerful. We don't need all that other stuff for that. I mean, okay, look at my office. There's a reason for this, right? So the printer's in the hallway now. Here's 2 camera bags, microphone, couple of cables, 360 camera, normal camera, controller, many SD cards, hard drive, 1 bag, another couple of bags, print, paper. It's a mess, but it's my mess. So I think that's fine, but if I was going to introduce someone to my working environment, I'd like to show them just a single thing first.
Yeah, and the other advantage is I don't look like a crazy person.
Oh, so I
You
look
don't
like
see
a
my
crazy
office.
person now. Well, Fabian, finally, you know me.
I mean, you have the one angle with the camera there, so I think it works out fine.
Yeah.
No, but I agree. I get it, and I agree.
So this, other than a little bit of time in the morning on Monday, I'm available for whoever wants to talk any time of day or night on whatever issues. You know, that's the way it is. And Peter, it's really upsetting that you can't be here, but maybe we can do something next year, of course, because just the hanging about. I mean, as I said earlier, walking with Brandel in London today was phenomenal. And I think the kind of conversations we are all having needs to be focused and also just wide ranging like that. So yeah, that's all very good.
Peter has a hand up.
Yes, he does. Hi, Peter.
Hi, I just got out of the architecture lecture. Really good. My mom's been watching them with me, and you should take a look. I dropped the link the last session to the listing of all the programs, and a couple of them actually touched on VR. So you might want to go and have a look at that playlist and take a look at that at some point. Thinking about my own slide deck, I'm a little bit torn. On the one hand, I'm tempted to drop in some actual screenshots of some user interfaces, but I'm afraid that maybe the details might get in the way of trying to just convey the gist. So now I'm thinking maybe I'd be better off with just a couple hand-drawn sketches of just the main elements instead of trying to give the pictures of the instantiated representations from different past projects. Any thoughts on that?
I'm of the opinion that pencil sketches can have their benefit, but they're also kind of cheating in a way because they add, you know, ambiguities. But if you feel that that works for you, fine. I don't know. What do the rest of you think?
Well, the specific oh yeah, Mark.
Just quickly, so I hear what Fred says. I'm in the context and listening to you describe it. I lean towards sketches. If sort of seeing finished things you think will lead the audience in a direction you don't want or give them an understanding you hadn't meant to, then sketches might be fine. And you can always make the, you know, you can always cover the point that you're not trying to hide anything. But sometimes, I mean, you know, there's a downside to each. But I wouldn't be averse to. I wouldn't feel cheated if I saw sketches. Put it that way.
Yeah, because the main gist of my talk is going to be how I want to borrow a couple interface affordances from different systems. So each one looks completely different than the other. They weren't designed to be used in a VR context. So I'm thinking that showing the pieces next to each other might just cause too much of a clash of visual styles alone to get the core idea of, okay, what we want to do is, we know that we can do this in 2D here. We know we can do this kind of thing here. Now, what would happen if we combine them in 3D? And the main example I'm thinking of is the user interface from the Inform 7 interactive fiction system. And I was thinking about dropping a screenshot of that in, but the trouble is the sub tabs are all specific to the interactive fiction context. And what I want to convey is the gist of having two tabbed panes, allowing you to switch between views and make selections in one and have that affect the other, and have that back and forth dialogue between the two panes. And that's what the command line interface component of my dream system should be like. So I'm thinking maybe it'd just be better with a little sketch indicating that, as opposed to the screenshot, although I could do the screenshot, but then people are going to look at the screenshot and say, gee, what does the story tab mean? What does the index tab mean in the wider context? Because I'm not going to have time to actually explain how it works when using that system.
What is the key message you're trying to convey here, though?
The key message is the interplay of the interactive views, that you need to have a transcript, you need to have a textual dialogue, and the textual dialogue should be able to drive the visualization dialogue, and having the transcript will let you replay back in time to access a past state of the system. And that each one of those things should be bookmarkable, so that I can go in and I can see, you know, how did it look at this point, so that that can then become a first-class object that we can reference at another point. You know, in about 6 months, I'll probably have a demo that actually integrates the stuff, but at the moment, my programming is way behind my design thoughts. So we don't have time to actually build a working mock-up. As nice as that would be, that'd be maybe late spring. I'll have a working mock-up that can show you exactly what I have in my head. But at the moment, maybe just a couple sketches might do a better job. Otherwise, I could show the picture, but then the details in the screenshots of the existing systems would raise a bunch of questions in the viewer's head that I wouldn't have time to answer, and it wouldn't even be relevant to the gist of the interplay of the different affordances.
I see lots of hands.
Yeah, so any feedback at this point would help. You sort of see the problem.
So to me, I'm very fine with stuff that looks very rough and raw. Not everybody's like this, but I think if the stuff that is rough and raw is interesting but intelligible, like we get what's actually valuable behind it, I think it's great, because I think indeed if you show something that looks finished but isn't, and you're not totally committed to actually delivering it, then you might stress yourself for nothing, or people might indeed have expectation or think like, oh, is this real? And if it's not, and yeah, you're really not there yet, I think having a very sketch-like thing is good. And not everything is like this. If there are the stuff that you've built before that isn't, that brings some, let's say, credibility to the fact that you might implement it, to me, that's great.
Mark, your hand's up and you're muted.
Apologies. I was just thinking back to your thought about saying, well, there was a sort of, you know, a screen or a screenshot in the sense of an interface you'd like to use, but you thought there was too much there. Again, I don't think it's undue disrespectful to just, for instance, if you just want to blank out some of the captions because they lead the reader astray, you can also say, what I'm showing you here is the structure of this thing. The point is to not to show you what the tabs say, or the, you know, how this thing is constructed. But I'm giving you, you know, to give you a visual example, and you can easily explain that as you show it. I know that's sort of suggesting work in terms of, tidying up the screen grab in a way that, well, that I wouldn't have to do. Somebody else might, but it's just another thought. So, you can slightly ride both things if you want. Because if you said where it's from, I don't think you're doing any sort of harm or disservice by necessarily just blanking out, sort of removing bits of text that have a salience you don't want.
Yeah, because I'm going to strongly recommend people should get that system and actually play with it. The earlier chat circle system, I don't think it's available online anymore, because that was like Java code from the early 90s. So that's not running. All we have there are a couple pictures. It's certainly replicable now, but the main point is just the idea of, okay, let's drop a vertical timeline, then put horizontal bars on the timeline to represent how much content there is at different points. And then when you mouse over, you do the reveal. And that's the whole key idea, is that linking these visualizations together. So maybe instead of doing that by hand, you could do it textually through the command line dialog and say, show me our conversation yesterday morning. And then that could cause the display of the transcript view to automatically focus in on that general block of time. And then you could go up to the visualization to highlight something. So it's the main point is this fluid interplay between textual directives to get it big abstract jumps in the interface, and then fine-grained scanning over it. And basically the idea of probing in cyberspace, where as you move a point around in 3D space, that point is defining what the query is. And then at the same time, that's a live query. So in another linked view, you see the results of that query. So you can basically scrub through, but have a multi-dimensional scrub, as opposed to just having like the horizontal bar in a video editing program to jump around or to jump to an audio fragment. You're moving in a 3D space and controlling what subview is going to be coming in. So again, what I want to convey is the idea that we can have this interplay of text and graphical selection and move back and forth between different representations of the view. So the big idea in Form was that the interface provided two panes and in a set of views. And either one of the sub-panes could have any one of the views. So that you could have two copies of the documentation if you wanted looking at different places, or you could have a copy of the documentation and the interactive game on either the right or the left, depending upon where you were moving. So you'd sort of like fluidly move between you're working in one pane, then you shift your focus to the other pane, change which one of the representations of the underlying system you're looking at, and then link from that off to a different representation in the facing pane and move back and forth, sort of fluidly weaving between the different perspectives.
Okay, that obviously sounds really good and is very in tune with what we're talking about. But how about this? Why don't you pick one of these types almost at random? Let's say you whatever's actually easier. Mock something up for us and we'll have a look at it, because you do have a few more days. We can even talk about it on Monday if you want.
Okay, that sounds good.
Because
And
when you get into that tone of voice, I do exactly the same thing. When you're excited about what something can do and we can't see it, it's just like, okay.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of
already-
frustrating.
Yeah,
Like
so
I
you
want to get out of
basically-
my head into your heads, and I'm not sure how to do it best.
Yeah, so you're basically proving the whole point about you need one of these two ways of representing it. So just start with one and just see where you get.
Okay, maybe a storyboard approach might work. Yeah, maybe that would be the best way to convey it. I'll try to come up with a couple storyboard sketches and I'll send them out to you when I have them. That might help best of all. Because it's really, what I want to convey is the process of using the different affordances. Each one is from their separate standalone system, but if we combine them and being able to weave between them, and Inform 7 really proves that that kind of jumping between views is highly effective. And I wish every system's documentation worked like that. It was just wonderful. The other great thing with the documentation in Form 7 is that there are two versions of the manual. And one version of the manual is, here's a system overview where we basically go through the system. Here are all the technical features. And then the other view of the manual is an outline of what kinds of things might we be trying to accomplish as an artist, And each one of those links back in to the system documentation for the point, and it also has examples. And if you click on the example, it will automatically load the example as a playable story. So it's that electronic notebook kind of idea combined with a hypertext and a command line driving it. It's a lot of potential there.
Yep. Okay. Put it
That's how to
together.
convey
Let's
glue
have a
into
look.
different bits.
We'll at least look at it Monday morning your time.
Yeah, I'll try to have some sketches, and then you can actually see the visuals I'm thinking about.
Super cool. Just looking at the calendar. Okay. Is it okay if we adjourn a little early today? Is there anything else on the agenda?
No, that's fine. And then that'll give me a little more time to work on the sketches too.
Yeah,
At least
cool.
if they're sketches, then they're all consistent with one another. And I'm afraid like one of the interfaces is black with light on it. The other one's a completely light interface. So they're completely different visual modes. And all the little sub-examples I'd want to draw on are all visually clashing with each other horribly, since they were all from completely separate standalone systems.
Yeah, super good. See you guys on Monday at the latest. Yeah, and yeah, very good. It's coming together. It'll be fun. And then after this, we'll have to wait a while for the transcripts and all that good stuff. And then we'll have another book.
Oh, one other question. How long do we have after the actual symposium to finish the extended version to go into the book?
Officially, you don't have anything, but the thing is, superficially or formally, whatever you want to call it, the way it works is send it an abstract or a title or a paper. And then do a presentation. You can do a presentation or a paper. Some people want to do both where they're different, that's fine. But generally, it will be the transcript of the presentation is what goes in the book. But if you prefer to have your presentation separate from your paper, that's fine. You can have, I think, safe to say 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks to get the transcripts done anyway.
Okay, great. That's a comfortable time window. Very good.
Good. Because also, what will be really useful to some people, not everybody, will be that once you have seen the presentations, you may want to edit your own. You know, write something at the end of it saying, you know, Fabian's multi-layered thing was so complicated. He should have done a simple version. Oh, he's listening. You know what I mean? So it will get a bit of a dialogue. As far as I'm concerned, as long as this is published online, available by the end of the year as the final written form, I'm okay. We agree with that, right? That's our only real deadline, isn't it?
Yep.
Good. Fantastic. But also, my inside source says the Apple VR headset will be available to developers in October. Brandel, I'm saying for the record, again, has said nothing about this, so I don't know if it's true, but I'm highlighting it just to warn you guys. It may be earlier than expected. So let's get as much recorded of our thoughts before this obscures our thinking as possible. That's all.
Okay. And at that point, shall I pause? Shall I stop? I think we're recording done for today. If we're winding
Yeah,
up.
I'm not sure if you or I am the one recording.
I'm recording.
Yeah,
So I
okay,
will
good.
press
Good.
the-
I'm
I will
just
press
going to
the-
give you in chat here. This is what Brandel mentioned when we were walking and talking earlier, but it's the review of the new supposedly Oculus killer, the Pico or something. I haven't watched it to completion myself, but you may enjoy watching it. I'm going to watch it now.
Ooh, shiny.
Shiny indeed. All right,
Have a
guys.
good weekend, guys.
Thanks very much. Bye. And
Oh,
Brandel,
okay.
go for a walk. Stay outside. Stay vertical. Don't sleep.
Yes,
See you
indeed.
later. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wait a minute.